Welcome. Gillian, of course, is the CEO of Booking.com, and Corinne is the co-founder of TomTom. So since we're talking about AI, I think as with all things AI, we have to start with some data. So I have some data here that I want to get to, but I want to ask actually the audience to answer these same questions. How many of you believe that AI will be a competitive advantage in the future? Show of hands. Pretty much the whole room. And I'm glad you're participating, yes. And how many of you would say your companies are implementing AI? Okay, pretty good share. So there's a study by a Boston Consulting Group that asked these same questions. And it found that 85% of firms agreed with the first question that AI is going to be a competitive advantage. Just 25% of firms said that they're implementing it. And 5% said they were doing so extensively. So I'm curious, we talk about ourselves being in the age of artificial intelligence. Why aren't those latter numbers higher? I mean, what's the holdup when it comes to taking what we think is going to be such a great competitive advantage and actually putting it to work? Do you want to start?
Yeah, so if I look at Booking.com, Booking.com has been always already a very data-driven company. So the step for us many years ago to move into machine learning was a very logical step. And because also you have all these data sets ready to be used, right, in these algorithms, which is the first step that many companies need to do, and that takes an investment, I think. So we did that, and throughout the journey today, people touch machine learning everywhere, from the search ads we have on Google to once people land on our products in Booking.com, towards which agent answers the phone call of a certain customer to. We translated 2.2 billion words last year, which is all done by machine learning, for instance. So, and I think, yeah, it starts with the data itself, I always say.
Right. So what's the hurdle to getting the data?
Yeah, well, I think you need to have it. It's all data-driven, and not a lot of companies have got that amount of data. It depends on your business. If you look for us, the same thing. I mean, for years we've had, we're mapping the world every hour. So you've got huge amount of data. The data needs to be labeled, and then you need to have a real purpose for it. Often in companies, you have someone who comes to the board of directors and says, well, we need to do AI, and it's not easy to understand what for. And people would think AI is about have a chatbot, it's AI. That's not the case. In both our industries, actually, that's center of everything we do.
Right, yeah. So you're both implementing AI, you mentioned, with customer service, especially at Booking, and with automated driving and mapping.
Yeah, we've done it actually for about 15 years,
right,
not 20
sure.
years. So just and for you as well, I think our business are built on the analysis of that data. That's what makes us productive, performant, predictive routing, for example. It's sort of AI.
So you're advanced, compared to these figures here. You're in that latter category when you're really using AI extensively. I'm wondering, even though you're at that point, what is your top concern right now when you think about artificial intelligence, the future of it? What sort of keeps you up at night in terms of how you're implementing it and the future of those projects?
Yeah, for me it sits in two areas. The first area is if you think about technology and how technology in the future will be the driver of social and economic change. And then if you look at diversity, then you already see the challenge. And I think that's something that needs to improve quite quickly, because otherwise we get all kind of biases in these algorithms. And that is something that with Booking we picked up some time ago, where we really started to focus on how can we make sure we bring more women into technology, for instance. But this is a focus that many companies need to have, because otherwise we will get other type of challenges in the future. Right. And then the other part, if you think about the travel journey, that's quite complex. So, and probably one of the most complex things to do, because a trip has so many elements. And then technology has a huge opportunity to improve these type of experiences, but it's also a very challenging one. So we need to take that step by step.
Sure.
Yeah, I think biases is a big problem. There are a lot of examples that if you've got only all the algorithms are programmed by white male, it's not a good idea. And I think both Gillian and I are actually doing quite a lot to promote women in technology. And I think it's just technology in general, education in technology. I'm always a bit flabbergasted by the fact that government don't realize the whole world is going digital everywhere. At the same time, the education system is just not coping. And the fact that in most countries you're not bringing tech education early on at school, I think is what keeping me awake at night. I think that, I think in the future it's not going to be between rich and poor. The divide will be between the digitally literate and the digitally illiterate or digitally innumerate. And I think that's, there's a tsunami about to happen. Everything we do, the way we shop, the way we date, not anymore, but young people in the audience anyway, and the way, everything that we do, the way we travel, the way we drive, the way we consume news, everything is driven by algorithms. And if we don't empower this generation to understand what it is that's behind the decision they're making, then they won't be at the table, they'll be on the menu, they'll be the recipient, they'll be the victims of that, and I think that's a problem.
Right. Well, you've actually done something about it. Well, both of you have in terms
both of
of
us.
the education aspect that you mentioned. Can you talk about your CODAM college?
Yeah, I think both of us are putting a lot of effort and our own time as well to encourage people to code. So I opened a coding school, so that's not for profit, but also very diverse, where you don't need any qualification to go into. So that's I really believe that it's important to get that tech education as widespread as possible.
Right.
And
you funded some scholarships for women.
Yeah, we do lots of initiatives. We fund scholarships to make sure we get more women into STEM subjects. We do the Technology Playmaker Awards to recognize women that have changed industries or companies and mainly focus on technology as well. So we do mentorship programs in a lot of the big tech conferences, which there's a high need for. So we bring women and we mentor women that are there on these conferences. So there's lots of initiatives that we are deploying. Yeah.
Do we have any audience questions? Not yet. I wanted to, oh, I'm sorry, we have one right in the middle. Can you introduce yourself?
Thanks very much. Hello, Nina Dos Santos, Europe editor at CNN. You talked about, Corinne, coding schools for younger people and the need for education around the world to incorporate technology inside syllabuses. But what about technology and the older generation, how AI can be used to help people at that end of the age spectrum? Thanks.
Yeah, I think it has to be, everybody needs to take a little bit of the journey. So primary education, the school that I've started is 18 plus, and there's no age limit actually, so anybody can train. When you have big workforces like us, Gillian's got many more people than I have. You've got, how many people do you have?
We have 17,500.
Yeah, I've got only 5. But anyway, about 5 people, 5,000. But the issue we both face is how do we train our workforce for the future as well. So it's a lot of the job that exists today won't exist in 10, 15 years' time. So a lot of the thing that we're working on is and we're in an extremely competitive environment driven by technology. So one of the core thing we do within the business is actually constantly training our workforce. You probably have similar.
Yeah.
That's so yeah, it's across the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. When we talked earlier, Corinne, you said to me that tech is a bad news story right now. And we see this. You talk about the automation of jobs and the potential loss of jobs. Data privacy is obviously a big issue. We see pushback from employees against the use of artificial intelligence and things like weaponry and, lethal drones, that sort of thing. I'm wondering how you think that you can change that narrative. What needs to happen to sort of change the tone around tech? And it kind of gets to the point about reaching other populations that aren't always talked about in these conversations.
Well, you want to talk about tech for good. I'm a great believer. I've been in technology for 30 years. I'm a great believer that technology is actually solving a huge amount of problems. And I think we need to look at technology in that concept. And I think we need to change perception by explaining. Technology is going to revolutionize health, for example, and travel, and the way we drive, and the way we is going to reduce deaths on the road as far as we are concerned, and make the world cleaner, safer. So there is a lot of good side of technology as well.
Yeah, and I think GDPR is actually, I think, a good example of what Europe has brought in legislation. And I think even with GDPR, companies still can use a lot of data sets to improve their experiences. And I think coming together like Europe did is actually a very positive change. And it brings a lot more clarity to consumers what happens with their data. I think it's often the unknown which also drives that people have this fear.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The fear of the unknown. I think we have a question, another question right in the middle.
Alice Rawsthorne, you've already alluded to gender bias being a problem in AI. What are the solutions? Because, as you've explained, so many of these systems are driven on historic data. What sort of measures can be put in place to minimize the impact of gender bias in systems driven by historic data? And what needs to happen going forward to make sure that it is more diverse and inclusive and more accurate?
Yeah, so it's a few elements. So if you think about the algorithms are basically as good as the data is. And then if you think about the algorithms today, they're written by people. So it starts by bringing more diversity within technology, in my opinion. And then it starts with HR. And then it starts with how can you make sure, and that even you can use AI within HR to look. We already do it, for instance, when we put out job adverts to make sure there's no bias in that. And you can use data even to make these type of improvements, but that's where it needs to start. And we realized that there's even not enough women out there, and that's why we started to stimulate through sponsorships, scholarships, and these type of initiatives. But there's still a lot of work to do because today there's not enough women that are choosing even these subjects to study.
Do you have a final thought?
Yeah, no, so it's the same with, so generally, especially in Europe, it's not the case in the US so much or in Asia, but especially in Europe, and also in Eastern Europe it's a bit different, that women don't embrace technology in terms of coding. And for Codam, I spend a lot of time. I want 50% of women. I've got 30%, so I'm not there yet, but we've done a lot of work in the way the school is bright and lots of colors, everything we advertise, and the way we do lots of growth hacking. We go and have personas of women, and we target them. We have evening when we invite only women with women speakers in cybersecurity. We make it look sexy. And you know what happened? We get them.
Yeah.
So, and it's really a question of perception. Because it is fun, because you can have impact, and coding is about creativity. I was saying to Gillian, we have some young women who just created from art academy and joined a coding school. So it is very much in the mind. It's about solving problem by creativity. So we can all change perception.
Great. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. I think even our next panel might talk about this, but thank you so much, Corinne and Gillian, for being with us.